say, about talking about your boyfriend, talking about your girlfriend, talking about relationships, meaning your father, your mother, your classmates, your peers, your teammates, your coaches. Everything is a relationship, and they all need work. Achieving some goals, we talk about what it takes to formulate an interest, to formulate a goal, and to be successful. Why is it important to develop, to be self-aware, to start to formulate what you want to do? Relates to success in family, friends, relationships, schooling, some type of graduation, some type of career. Lowers emotional distress, and I'll tell them, we talk about stress like it's automatically negative. Stress by itself is not a negative term. Distress is, there's a very positive stress. It's called eustress. It's okay to be stressed. It's okay if you're an athlete, if you're a good student who takes school seriously, if you're doing something, you're nervous, you're anxious, that's a good feeling. It's the distress we have to avoid. Increase that self-esteem, that positive well-being. And if I feel like I've had to do this with 52 minutes or 47 minutes and I had to get out, so I've had an hour to do it, I've had a class time to do it, so bear with me. And again, if there's any questions, please raise your hand. I've got plenty of time, not going anywhere. I know Belle's going to ring here, so at any time, raise your hand. I start with this to show the students this hierarchy of needs, and we're going to break it down into some of the basic needs where I talk about how do you get to self-awareness, how you get to self-image and self-esteem. It starts at the bottom. Safety needs. A lot of students will come into a school building day after day. They don't feel safe. They're terrified of who they're going to see in the hallway or what's going to happen to them. And to make other kids realize that is very important. Freedom from fear. A lot of kids don't have that. Some students leave a school building terrified to go home, and other students have no idea of that. And it's to keep them aware.
This presentation that you're using, do you share it? Like, do you share the slideshow or no?
I can, yeah.
So if we give you an email or something,
Sure.
you can share it?
Yeah. If I don't own any of this, and the more kids they can reach, the better. I have no problem getting this out there. Belongingness, love, intimacy, communication. Another need that to some people seems obvious and seems like, yeah, what do you mean? You don't have that, or you don't have friends, or a lot of kids don't. A lot of kids don't have close friends. A lot of kids eat by themselves. A lot of kids, nobody talks to them in the hallway. And the communication cycle, to understand why am I communicating, who am I communicating with, what's the purpose of it, the interaction, the different types. Again, it's hard to get them to realize what they're doing, what they're saying, who they're saying it to, and why. This is always a fun one. Esteem, reputation, status. Ask a kid what's reputation. What are certain kids' reputations? If you ask certain kids, well, this kid's known for this, or that girl's known for that. Sometimes it could be good. Unfortunately, a lot of times reputations aren't that positive. So always make them read that quote and understand their character. It starts with character, knowing who you are, knowing who you want to be. And if you're focusing on a reputation, if you're focusing on a status in a school building, or how you want to be seen, you're most likely sacrificing your self-respect. You're going to make decisions that don't reflect who you are or who you want to be. Like I tell them, I've worked with a lot of hardened, violent youth, and the really, really tough ones, they know who they are. They don't go out and try to impress people. And if you're not who you're trying to be, I guarantee you, they will meet one day. Your reputation will meet your character. They're going to find out what you're really about. Knowledge, understanding, self-awareness, be cognitive, be aware of what's going on inside your head, again, around you, understanding we'll talk about vulnerabilities and how that plays into the understanding and the self-awareness and how you put yourselves in certain situations. But being self-aware, like I say time and time again, I'm not up here because I don't make mistakes. I'm not up here because I make the best decisions. To get kids to realize that, yes, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to do things that you should regret, will regret, or you shouldn't have done. It's okay to understand, self-correct, be self-aware, and get past it. Worry about your character. We will have flaws, we do have flaws, but to keep moving forward is hard to get kids to realize. What is a healthy relationship? And again, relationships, I mean any relationship that involves somebody else is a relationship. What does one look like? What does one feel like? So this slide, I'll ask the students to throw out some terms, throw out some words that would be or should be in a healthy relationship. Let's hear a couple. Trust. Honesty. Communication. Respect. And most of the kids, they nail it. And I've heard some other ones that aren't up there. I only put a few. A lot of them say patience. They say support. They say forgiveness. They say selflessness. I've heard some great ones. But yeah, to understand what it means to be in a healthy, safe relationship. Privacy. Understanding communication, consent. What about an unhealthy relationship? Society, some people, a lot of people in their lives are not modeling healthy relationships. Unhealthy relationships are built in peer pressure, manipulation, coercion, control. And to get youth to understand, once you let yourself lay a foundation to get used to being manipulated.
Well, I just want to ask, if you were to say like a thought of like how many teens that you encounter that would be like breaking the law or something like that, like how many of that would come from a healthy relationship with their parents or an unhealthy relationship with their parents? Is there a correlation at all?
I think that goes back to the level of openness. A lot of people, students or young adults with good relationships with their parents, that doesn't mean that they're not doing anything that could be borderline criminal or could be borderline unsafe or things like that. But that just means they might have the ability and the awareness to tell their parents about it. And we'll talk about sexting and sextortion. Being able to talk to somebody, the communication aspect. If you messed up, tell somebody that you messed up. You have to start there. And so that's really a big part of, again, we make mistakes, but realize don't compound it by making another mistake and then lying about that mistake. And then,
that's good.
So young people have to understand, when you seek that reputation, when you seek that status, you're putting up with things that deep down inside you don't want to, and you know it doesn't feel right. But when you get used to being manipulated, being controlled, being coerced, every time you do, you think less of it the next time and less of it the next time, and you're okay with it, which you shouldn't be. Misconceptions, of course, and most of the students know I've talked to 7th up through 12th, and even in some I have a modified version of this for Penn State student athletes. We get into, again, a lot of these same issues, plus Title IX, things like that. But again, the misconceptions of happy, healthy relationships. Young people are growing up, being in school buildings, being socialized, and to think this is normal. To think that their boyfriend should be able to take their phone, or their friend should be able to tell them where to go, or where not to go, hey, don't hang out with them, come hang out with you. Or what are you doing? Permission, control, anger is always present. Those aren't good things. These are not part of healthy relationships. Question? So how do they develop? How do you find yourself in unhealthy relationships where you're getting used to, where you're getting socialized to that manipulation, that peer pressure? We'll talk about each one of these one by one. This is really how it breaks down and how you find yourself as a junior high schooler being confused as a police officer into dealing with people in their 20s and 30s who are now addicted, depressed, anxious every day of their life. Vulnerabilities. Once again, I will tell any young person, adults are vulnerable. We all have vulnerabilities. Being able to understand your vulnerabilities, know what they are, know where they come from. Sometimes they're just experiences, and experiences cannot be changed, but we can adapt the way we think about our experiences. Personal family instability, social instability. When we talk about vulnerabilities and how it puts a youth at risk, exploiters will either prey on or create vulnerabilities to isolate, and we'll talk about grooming, and how they get to young people to separate them from healthy relationships and from trusted resources. Addiction, chaos, tension. It is a very, very practiced skill that is scary how effective it is. I never ask a student or a class to raise their hand, but I say these are some vulnerabilities. These are what makes people vulnerable. This could be a very short list. Understand, if you see an experience up there that applies to you as a classroom, be self-aware. Understand you can't change it, but what can you do about it to not feel as ashamed, to not feel as depressed, not feel as anxious or frustrated. It starts with the communication, being aware, and you have to go, everything starts there. But this is what groomers and exploiters are preying on, people with these vulnerabilities. Yes?
Okay, so this is
agree with you. But this is the stuff that they're running in our schools right now. And I was just watching a video the other day of a Moms for Liberty president being drilled over her just saying this stuff shouldn't be in our schools because of this. And the mindset, like, Romans 1 just runs through my head, just like how God just turned over the word of Craig and Wyoming, just the stuff that this woman was saying, like, anytime she would come out and be like, but this is extortion, this is grooming, this is what's going on, we can't have this stuff in the school because of this, and any child, and they were talking about a book about a boy giving his experience of him being sexually abused by a teacher and by a family member, and they were like, well, he has the right to read this book in the library, and the Moms for Liberty lady was like, no way, like, you want to put that in the public library, you want to have free access to it, go to the public library, why would you need to have this in the schools? This is what's happening. And it was like, they could not, I mean, just listening to the argument was almost like, how in the world could you possibly see that way? But that's what we're getting right now in the schools, is we have people who are exploiting their own children, who are fighting for this stuff to be okay. And you're putting this presentation on in the schools, which I commend you greatly for creating the fact that you could get this into the schools at this time. It's huge. It's huge. But I'm wondering how much backlash you're getting with this kind of information.
None now. And as I was, groomers, exploiters, abusers, they prey on and they have been operating on the fact that we have all remained silent, that we are ignoring it. Now that I'm in the schools, I've had superintendents, principals, teachers sit in on this exact presentation, and we'll get to some slides, and some of the things that they were terrified of people saying, of me saying sexual aggression, sexual grooming, sexual abuse. I said, we're past tiptoeing. We are past dancing around concepts. No, because it's damaging and it's ruining young people. School settings, school buildings, run the risk, and we talked about status, reputation, of creating a power imbalance or an imbalance of power, very, very big in those types of social settings. And if you have a student whose vulnerability is attention, or is popularity, or is wanting to go to parties, or things like that, you see they're reaching out, they need to be accepted. They're reaching out, they're putting themselves out there at a disadvantage to do things that, again, ultimately, they don't really want to do. They just want to be seen as something that they're not, have something that they think they want. And the key to keeping your balance is knowing when you've lost it. I always like to get the students to try to think about it like, the key to keeping your balance is knowing when you're starting to lose it. If you've lost it, be self-aware, get right back, but understand that feeling and don't ignore it of, this just doesn't feel right, this isn't me, what am I doing here? For them not to ignore that feeling. This tool explains some of the ways an abusive partner may use power and control to manipulate a relationship. And once again, we talked about unhealthiness, the foundations. If young people are getting used to being blamed, they're getting used to being pressured, isolated, controlled, emotionally abused, they're laying a very, very dangerous self-image and self-worth. And it's very, very hard once they think nothing of themselves to get them back to a normal self-esteem. Anybody in here not heard this term grooming? What it means is how we're about to talk about it. This concept has been around, if I had to guess, 60, 70 years. Social services, educational fields, psychology, journal articles written about it, movies have been made about it, books. Survivors have talked about it, yet to this day, it is just as or more effective and more dangerous now than it ever was. A lot of it has to do with, of course, phones, social media. But what is it? What does it mean to be groomed? What is a groomer trying to do? Manipulation used by a sexual predator for the purpose of creating a sense of trust with a targeted person based on a vulnerability prior to the act of actually victimizing them. After the grooming process, the predator, the groomer, the exploiter will use more overtly abusive tactics. They'll turn very forceful, fraudulent, coercive, physically disrespectful, emotionally degrading, and to get them to realize this before it starts. Again, self-awareness, self-image. Why does it work? Why is it so powerful? Subtle. subtle, it catches it's like fishing in a bucket. Who are they catching? Who are they giving attention to? Kids who are craving attention. Who are they giving gifts and money to? Kids who crave material possessions. So it's not hard to see how they initially hook them. And gradually, I'll look to a class, I'll say, what does gradual mean? And some of them, they'll say it. So gradually, is it going to change for the better, or is it going to change for the worse? They all say, it's going to change for the worse. Yes, you're correct. And then once it escalates, and we'll watch a video here, a survivor, and she talks about once it escalates, and once you actually realize what's going on, in her words, for hearing her say it, she said, it's too late. And that's from somebody who lived that, for her to just flat out say it's too late, it's very, very scary. The stages, again, the targeting based on vulnerabilities, gaining trust of that person and the people around them, feeling a need, meeting those vulnerabilities, giving them that attention and affection, whatever they need, they are getting it tenfold, isolating them, and sexualizing the relationship, maintaining control physically, emotionally, psychologically. And has anybody ever heard of Grace Tatum? She travels the world talking about her experience. I'll let her, nobody says it better than somebody who's lived it.
Grooming can be broken down into 6 main concurrent phases, which I've talked about a lot. They're repeating, and I will be talking about them non-stop until the message really does hit home. The first phase of grooming is targeting the individual. So that's targeting somebody who's vulnerable, whose circumstances lend themselves to be manipulated. In my case, not only was I an innocent child, I was also suffering from anorexia, and I had significant change at home. The second phase is gaining trust, and that is establishing a connection with the individual to make them feel as though they're heard, to make them feel as though they're safe and secure. The third is filling a need that is very calculated, especially this piece, because it involves playing a role to fill a gap in the emotional or mental support of a target. So in my case, although I come from an incredibly loving, supportive, attentive family, and at the time I had a team of medical professionals as well around me, guiding me in my recovery, a lot of their support was in the form of tough love. So the man that abused me adopted the role of sympathizer and told me everything that as a young, vulnerable 15-year-old I wanted to hear. The fourth phase is isolating, and that is breaking down the already tenuous relationships that the target has with their genuine supporters. Now that is an interesting piece because it involves turning certain people away or pushing certain people away, but also exploiting others. So one of the things that I'm keen for people to understand is that predators don't just groom the individuals, they groom everyone around them to serve their end. So they'll groom colleagues accordingly. They sort of weaponize people, use them as pawns. It's like a chess game. The fifth phase is sexualizing, and that is gradually exposing the target to sexual content so as to normalize it. I don't know if you've heard of the frog in boiling water analogy. This one certainly applies here. I mean, it applies to grooming as a whole, but it certainly applies here. It's very insidious, and by the time the abuse is actually introduced, it's too late. The sixth phase is maintaining control, and that is the striking of a balance between causing pain, but also providing the relief from that pain, so that you're solely dependent on the abuser for your self-esteem, your self-worth. Your concept of self is completely destroyed by the abuser, and therefore dictated by the abuser.
I've told the teachers and principals, and I'm glad I'm finally being let in here, let into buildings and school buildings, but in a perfect world, this video in a discussion group of students could take an hour by itself. This presentation could take a week by itself to get through to kids. I guess we have to be grateful for the time that we have with the kids. But this video is so powerful. She talked about her vulnerability, which was what led to her anorexia, so self-image, body image issues, and how did her family deal with that? And what did the person who recognized that and saw, well, if I just tell her this, or if I just say everything's going to be okay, and I'll tell young people the communication and being self-aware, and I said, if somebody's always telling you what you want to hear, if they're always what you want, and adults who are trusted and adults who we should sometimes tell you what you need to hear. If you're always being told what you want to hear, that's not a good thing. She talked about the frog in boiling water. I'm not a scientist, I never boiled a frog. But what that's supposed to mean, if you don't know, is if you drop a frog in water that's boiling, the frog's going to immediately jump out. If you put a frog in water and you turn the heat up, and then you turn the heat up again, and then again later, the frog's going to do what? It's going to get used to its environment, it's going to stay there. And it's going to stay in a situation that's dangerous. So, to understand that, like she said, once you realize, ouch, this is hot, it's too late. Fake trustworthiness, testing of physical boundaries, the exposing them to content, to getting them thinking that content is normal or language is normal when it's not. Sharing materials, exploiting curiosities, breaking rules, drugs and alcohol, the blaming and confusing. She talked about how they groom people around them. So now it's literally is a mind game with a young person. Who do they tell? Nobody's going to listen to you. It's my word against yours. You remember all the drugs and alcohol I gave you? I'll just tell them that you've been drinking this whole time, that you've been doing drugs this whole time. And they feel like they can't. In the isolation, everybody that would have cared or did care is already gone. So everything is a plan of attack with rumors. Very methodical. Why is it so powerful? Why does it continue to work again for 50, 60, 70 years? We can talk about it. We can tell people about it. But people that are vulnerable still get tricked all the time. Because of the sense of trust, the needs that were being met, the vulnerabilities that were being met, the way they felt. And when it's over, how do you feel when you lost something that you thought you had earned or that thought that you deserved? You feel embarrassed, you feel ashamed, you feel frustrated. So why do they stay? The initial effect, that emotional bond, that initial period of finding something that you were longing for. Not realizing that they knew what they were giving you, and they know they're going to take it away from you. They believe they're a problem, they're going to fight to get it back. As police officers, and this can go into domestic violence, any type of abuse is abuse. It's all abuse. And when we make arrests for domestic violence, that night, the victim wants the person arrested, wants the person charged, wants the person thrown in jail. 2 weeks later at the hearing, what does the same victim want? Wants the charges dropped. We made stuff up. That's not really what happened. Why? Because they've had 2 weeks to be either through phone calls if they were in jail or if they were on bond, of talking to the person saying, what are you going to do without me? Who's going to pay for this? Nobody else is going to want you. You're nothing. And come court time, we're liars. We made it up. She wants him back home. When we talk about being self-aware and understanding what kind of person, if you're looking and paying attention, what kind of person grooms somebody? What kind of person exploits? What kind of person victimizes? And what are we missing with people? Antisocial personalities, pro-criminal attitudes, social support. So if the people you surround yourself with, if you're noticing how they act, how they treat people, what they're doing, if we're really paying attention, you will see their low level of empathy, or their superficiality, or their insane social skills on a very shallow level, or their lack of ability to actually care about somebody if you're really watching. When it comes to students and grooming in the aspect, from unfortunately people that have been groomers, we can talk about teachers, police officers, people in trusted positions. And like I tell students, I'm not saying that anybody in your building I'm not saying it is happening, but I'm saying it can happen. So when I point that out, I say the only thing I would say is a low engagement with employment or education. don't assume that a teacher or an officer or a counselor, don't think they can't. I'm not saying they will, but self-aware. Pay attention to what you're seeing and how you feel. Don't think they can't just because blind trust or blind authority.
Yeah, I hate to ask this question, but like, I've experienced somebody who was abused like in this way. Do you find that people who are abused tend to abuse as well? Like, what is there a connection there? I hate to even ask that question.
But yeah, I mean, and when I give another presentation on sex trafficking, and that's more adult oriented, but yeah, when I talk about the different types of traffickers and how somebody can traffic another human being, and when a lot of the behavioral concepts and affective concepts comes down to, maybe they were trafficked, they were abused, and they just developed that mentality. Well, I guess you gotta fend for yourself, because it's a very selfish, self-serving mindset. But yeah, sometimes it happens where those who have been groomed start grooming people, those who have been abused start abusing people.
So I'm gonna piggyback here. This, just so you know, this is my platform too, so I completely understand where you're going with this. But what I will say in working with women who have been abused, and children who have been abused, there is an aspect of this we do see that there are different profiles. There's some profiles here, but I would say there's also a very passive profile that comes across as people like that person individually. They are engaged with everyone else, and that's their MO. Like, that's how they cover up. So a lot of times in abusive cycles, you'll see a honeymoon phase that happens within a relationship where everything's really great and it looks really good. But the cycle continues where it ends up in abuse. So sometimes, to answer your question, sometimes when the person is involved in a cycle, they don't quite, sometimes they're very connected to that person and it seems like a safe, or it seems like a stable relationship. And a lot of times it's like, I hate to say this, but in the church, I will walk into relationships with people and immediately know, just because I've been there before, and I can see this situation, and the person is not even aware that there's abuse going on in the marriage, or abuse that's going on in their home. And they just don't understand it. And the person that is abusing them usually looks like the good guy. And so we say this is like, the abuser usually is a taker, but they really look great. And the person who looks like they are the messed up one is usually the victim. And so sometimes in churches, I do a program called Comfort through Leslie Vernick, and she does a really great job at exploring this concept in the church and explaining, because a lot of times, even as leadership will come in looking at the situation and go, well, this person really looks dysfunctional and this person really looks great. And so sometimes we will see an MO that looks like the one person is doing, like they're the one who's like, my wife or my husband, and they're really the abuser. So sometimes I agree with you on most of these things outrightly, but there is another profile that does come across as looking like, can they, and I will say, as in my own testimony in the church, there were many times where people thought I was the abuser, because I had a very passive ex, and he would probe to get me to react, and then when I reacted, he would see what I have to do with. So we do have a profile, and I'm only saying that is many years ago, but I'm only saying that from experience and from working with a lot of women who bring into relationships, sometimes you'll see this even in a youth, in correspondence to their parent. Yeah. And a lot of times it looks like, oh, they're just being bad, or they're acting out, or they're doing all these things. And a lot of times that is coerced from a parent who is just, I'm just trying to help. So sometimes you do see those things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is very, very general. Like, I have to get as much information out there as possible. It's not like you have 2 weeks, so I know you have 37 minutes to talk to these kids about this stuff. So.
How often do you see students grooming other students?
Yeah, and that's where the power imbalance. And because
increasing number.
Yeah.
And that's more of, I guess, that situation is sex trafficking. But we do see that more often.
the upperclassmen who take advantage of that power imbalance, you're essentially, maybe you don't realize it, maybe you don't think what you're doing is those parties where, you're still, on some level, you're taking advantage of somebody else. And that's to get them to realize that. it's hard.
I think we're seeing those numbers growing too, because the traffickers are getting really good. And the way of the internet is just based in this, where they're actually grooming. I mean, this is the thing, and I'm sure you do this in your talk with this trafficking. A lot of these young girls, now even young boys, are being trafficked by other peers and will engage other peers to like, hey, meet me at the park.
They recruit,
And then
victims recruiting future victims. So what does this offender do? It follows the same guidelines as the grooming process. It's this type of person. They're identifying vulnerable people. They're identifying risk factors. How can I get this person to trust me as quickly as possible? Exploiting those vulnerabilities, at some point establishing power and control over that person by physical isolation, emotional isolation, everything they can do to make them lose every sense of their self that they ever had, and push their friends away, push their family away, and preventing disclosure. Literally, nobody left to turn to for these people. You kind of touched on it. It's called intermittent reinforcement. Why people stay, because like Grace said, they caused the pain, but then they're relieving the pain. How can I relieve the pain if I'm the one that caused it?
well, they're also blaming too. So like you're the problem, and they know that if they come out, they're going to be the one who looks like the problem. So somewhere.
And another taboo word sometimes in schools, no, we're going to talk about it. Sexual aggression, sexual grooming, getting young people used to situations that they should not be getting used to, getting them desensitized. Well, I like to say, people they will try to desensitize you to physically aggressive situations, emotionally awkward situations, and you should not be okay with feeling a certain way or being talked to a certain way. Language, behavior, social situations where there's people you don't know around you, and they're all enclosing on your personal space, and then they're going to play the victim. I asked the students what they think that means, so I'll kind of play out a scenario. So you met this person, things are they were subtle, now gradually it's getting a little bit different. So they're starting to talk to you a certain way, starting to say things that you're like, wait, what'd you say? And they're starting to put you in situations where you don't feel safe, you don't feel respected, maybe starting with the touching, and then you say something. So you're that frog that's in the water's getting hot, and you say something. And then what's the groomer going to say? What's the abuser going to say? No, that's not, why are you taking it like that? That's not what I meant. You can always trust me. I will always protect you. You're right, I'm sorry. Ask a young lady, what did you just apologize for? You just apologized for feeling unsafe, for feeling scared, for feeling disrespected, and now you're saying that you're sorry for it? How much longer before, like Ray said, it's too late? If you're apologizing for feeling unsafe. Just kind of a review slide. Tell the students, just read through that, ask yourself, run through it in your head. What does that mean? How can that lead to me being exploited? And I've been in presentations, and I've had students start crying in the back room. I've had students I thought were going to cry. I've had students bumping each other when we talk about controlling relationships, and point to the screen. I've had to tell teachers, you might want to check, I don't know her name, but you might want to check on her. She was looking pretty shook up when I was talking about this stuff. It's affecting students in a very real way.
Do they have breakout sessions? Like when you guys do this in the schools, is there any?
I'm just getting in. I mean, maybe something that we can. Yeah, that'd be awesome for you. If you guys are on any school boards or know any school board members.
Was this the same presentation you did at Wisconsin like last week?
Yes.
Okay, my daughter was in that class, in the 8th grade class, and she came home and told my husband and I about this. So we have already, so it's exciting for me, not exciting to hear about this, but at the same time, now I can see, she was like, oh, it was like that movie we went to see because we took her to see Soccer Freedom. And she's like, I was picking things out going, okay, we've already talked about this, and, some questions she had or whatever, but they are coming home and making
In
things so
good
they can,
homes,
yes.
in good homes, that's happening.
Yep.
But I'm concerned about the ones who are picking up on this and no one is
Reinforcing it.
and I know one is discussing everything.
Oh yeah, and that's why to be able to follow up, to be able to reinforce it. I mean, this, like I said, this should be a class. I mean, this should be a classround subject.
So thank you. Because it's different coming from someone else than it is.
Absolutely. And I have three kids and 2 daughters myself.
Yeah.
And I only put this slide up there with the youth. I do a whole other presentation on sex trafficking, but When I tell the students, I said, this is up here only because there are young people, sometimes younger than a lot of the kids I talk to, that are being sex trafficked. And I'm not telling them that it's going to happen, but I'm telling them if you don't understand your character, if you don't understand your self-awareness, if you don't understand what you want to do with your life, and you fall down, you go down those roads where you get used to peer pressure, being manipulated, being controlled, this is a possible end result. I'm not threatening anybody, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I'm saying if you don't pay attention, students your age, people your age are being trafficked against their will every day, and they're living nightmares. Understand it's a possibility. So that's only how I mention sex trafficking with the students I talk to. So why then? Why that age group? We could say 6 through college, 7 through 12, whatever. We could say 12 to 20-year-olds. Why are they most at risk? That combination right up there, they're naive. They don't understand that gifting process where they're being given things that they didn't ask for, things they didn't, it's very, not uncommon for kids to just accept, oh cool, you're gonna give me that, you're gonna give me that, and I try to tell them. In some situations, there's different types of, there's the boyfriending tactic, there's the friend, so again, this is kind of all encompassing, but ultimately when that person is given a bunch of gifts, and then the groomer's gonna ask them to do something, and then when the kid says no, what's the groomer gonna say? Well, you must have misunderstood. Everything I just bought you, all those gifts, those weren't free. You're gonna go do this now, and that's how it starts. Developmental intensity, naturally growing apart. They want to make decisions. They want to be seen as independent. They lack life experience. And we talk about decision making, and any adult knows to make a good decision, what do we usually reference? Past decisions, life experiences. Kids don't have that, so they don't understand things. And if you notice, groomers try to move things along quickly. They'll make them, we'll talk about sextortion and sexting. If you put a kid under pressure, you're going to make a bad decision. How can we prevent or how can they prevent it themselves, or how can we prevent youth from becoming victims? Utilize protective factors, develop competencies, help them to develop things for themselves. Protective factors, pretty much the opposite, hopefully, of vulnerabilities. Building self-esteem, if it's low. Encouraging, including, accepting, communication, awareness, safe social media. All these things need to be embraced, need to be reinforced, and by adults need to be kind of modeled. We should be the ones setting the example. Discussing other relations with your children, with your children's friends. I mean, you can't talk to too many people about it. You can always ask my daughter, I always want to know who her friends are, how her friends are doing. I always follow up on them too. Make sure that just things that, if I hear keywords or things I should, what do you mean by that? Or what do you mean they did this? Or who's talking to them? Or then I'm always looking to help whoever we can. Just a graphic I have a safe social media presentation that I give. I strictly talk about online social media, some of the benefits, some of the safety risks. But so this is one of the graphics. Again, you never know who you're talking to. A groomer obviously comes off as being very, very patient, kind, and loving, but in most cases, he's literally the devil. Getting kids to understand, especially that reputation, that status, they have to tell a kid, dude, you got to take school seriously. You have to take something seriously. You have to take learning seriously. Go to school, pay attention. It's not cool. They want to be seen in school. They want to be seen as, some kids like it, some kids don't like school, but to get them into schools, you have to. You got to go to school. You got to learn something. You have to develop yourself intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, socially. I asked them, what does it mean to be competent? What is a competency? And a lot of them they'll kind of get around to it. It's being efficient, being effective, being good at something. You have to be good in social situations. You have to be good at handling your emotions. Decision making, another very, very important part of being competent, growing up, and some of these things go into making a decision, being self-aware. Identify your thoughts, emotions. Who here makes great decisions when they're hungry, tired, or mad?
Right.
So, and again, as adults, we don't always make the best decisions, but to understand what state of mind are you in when you're about to make a decision. Are you scared? Are you frustrated? Are you tired? Thoughts versus feelings. If you think something long enough, you're going to feel it and you're going to act on it.
What are some things that, like, ways that parents can help the teenager walk through, like, good decision making?
Model good decisions.
Yeah.
be honest and open and transparent about your bad decisions, or things you could have done differently, or talk through if a decision could affect them and involve them in it. Yeah, that's
really good.
growth mindset. Always be trying to learn, adjust, and improve. I can make some comparisons. A lot of the students I talk to are athletes, so we can always make athletic references. Learn, adjust, improve. If you play football, if you play baseball, or any basketball or golf, you can always make an adjustment. You're always looking to improve there. So improve academically, or improve psychologically. It's all the same thing. You want to be better at something. Manage yourself. Awareness, identification, and tolerance of emotions. A lot of kids are in a school building thinking that they can just disrespect who they want, that they don't have to like anybody, they can treat people however they want to treat them, and I make sure they know. I said, I guarantee you, there's somebody in this building that you don't like, that you think you can pick on, I guarantee you they don't like you either. So let's just leave each other alone. Let's just do that. Let's go through life, and it's okay. And some teachers might be like, what do you don't have to like everybody that you're doing. You don't have to be friends with everybody, but you have to respect everybody that you do. If you don't like them, then leave them alone. Don't talk to them. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. How do your thoughts, feelings, emotions affect your behavior? Again, ask yourself that. Relational awareness. We've all seen empathy, that definition. I like to say, true empathy, you don't understand somebody else. You don't know what it means for somebody else to feel the way they feel. You don't know why they feel that way. Don't assume that you do. You don't feel their experiences if you, sorry.
We were just saying on the last slide, I think, and I'm an educator, I don't do this personally, but I feel as though with my own child, she's in 8th grade, schools are forcing these kids to tolerate each other and to, I understand we always tell, my husband's a teacher too, we always say, you don't have to be best friends, but you have to be friendly to each other. Be kind, be caring, but at the same time, you don't have to go out of your way and sit with them at the lunch table.
No, not at all.
It's okay to have boundaries, but I think even in the elementary school, there's boundaries, Even in the elementary school, oh, you two aren't getting along, you're gonna eat lunch together for a week. That is awful.
Yeah.
You're creating more tension between those kids.
And they're taking away their right for a boundary. So those drop boundaries is what makes them look great to a groomer or another's child that would groom them into something like this. And I think that you hit it right there. I think sometimes that is what, for whatever reason, psychologically, I think that this is kind of what they're trying to force feed the kids nowadays. Like if you
And
think
I
that
understand the concept of it because, being an educator for 18 years, I understand, we need to be tolerant of each other, but you shouldn't force kids to be friends.
we can be tolerant and have boundaries and have personal boundaries. And I think that that's, what makes somebody eligible to be eligible to a victim of grooming is that very thing right there, that it takes away the personal boundary, your personal awareness of what someone else is doing. And
Or if we give them some space,
or we teach them
maybe they'll
personal,
2 years down the road find something that they
or
want.
teach them how to be, like you said, just kind of like, you don't have to talk with them, but you don't have to be friends, but just be friendly. And I think that's completely missing from what we're teaching our kids.
Absolutely.
in school systems.
And the empathy, like we talked about, assuming that every kid feels safe, or assuming that nobody is abused, or assuming that some kid doesn't go to bed hungry every night. Like, you don't know what their experiences are. And to assume that you do is pretty disrespectful. So just treat people with the dignity that we all deserve. And don't force people if they don't get along, and they might come around later, but don't force people to talk to each other if you can say they don't like each other.
Is there a way to teach empathy if they're not empathetic?
Somebody who shows a true lack of empathy, there should be some intervention there. Because if you can identify a kid at a certain age who's not empathetic, who doesn't show kind of that, who's very callous, I guess you'd say, that's some other signs of some other behavioral issues. But
It's very possible that child has a reason for being that way.
yeah,
Is what I hear you saying.
absolutely. Somebody's.
There's a reason, and we're talking elementary and in younger grades, we're seeing that this, forcing them to kind of be friends or forcing them to be
together, okay, you're
Well, and then what are you building? Like on some level, now you're going to build a superficial kid who's just going to play a game and just, if I just say this, I can just do this for 10 minutes, they're going to leave me alone. And then, so now you're forcing kids to shout.
you're grooming them to be exploited. It's
Yeah.
basically what
You're
happening.
teaching them to be superficial and manipulating them, or they're manipulating you now. Because I'll sit here for 10 minutes, I'll act like I know what I'm doing, and I'll make a few jokes, and then I'll do what I want.
Not to give away my age, but I mean, when I was younger, there was a way to handle things like that. We just punched them in the face. I mean, not like that, but like if you think about it, like you were like meet me in the playground, right? I mean, nowadays it's like, oh no, you can't do that. Like that would be terrible. And I think that coming in and trying to create those environments where we all just get along, I think is actually done.
And that's,
opposite.
you know, being down from the high school, the stations right next to the high school, even any high school building. Most kids, drama and social situations cause fights. Most times, the two kids that fight never wanted to fight in the first place. And the ones that do want to fight, if you want to be real about situations, two kids that want to fight, give them boxing moves. Go ahead, go fight. You guys got 5 minutes, go fight each other.
Right.
And I guarantee they'll either be friends or their differences will be solved after that. Nobody's going to get hurt. Yeah.
I'm not saying social, I don't think violence is the answer. I'm not saying that.
Sometimes
We're sitting in this room.
sometimes
Do
violence
not
can be used.
misunderstand. I'm just saying that the way that problems are solved today is very different than the way that they were solved
Well,
before.
we're not letting people solve their own problems anymore. Appreciate differences, consider consequences, and you've already talked about boundaries, so yeah, relational management, conversate, communicate, identify problems to resolve them. We have kids who want to blame everybody, point things out, make excuses, all that kind of conflict resolution. If you're always the person that's going to give your opinion or make a statement, those are the ones who really can't take something being said to them either. So if you're going to run your mouth, be able to be talked to back too. So otherwise, just keep your mouth shut. It's really not that hard.
You just defined the teenager, but thank you. That's great.
So, wait, I have a question. Like, I feel like the other side of this page is like entitlement, right?
Yes.
Like identifying problems that's not to resolve, like that seems to be entitlement. What do you do in that situation? You're an entitled teenager.
Oh, I don't even know. My kids are, we live in a throwback house. Like, we have one television, we don't have my kids just, we don't do things where they feel entitled or they feel like they're being punished all the time. Yeah, I don't even know how I do it. I mean, I coach baseball and I'm around youth a lot. Like, I gotta watch what I say a lot of times because parents they're the ones raising entitled kids, and they're not realizing it, and how much you're not helping your kid by letting them think he or she can do what they want or say what they want or point things out. But then the second that somebody says something, they come to you crying, and you're gonna comfort them. Well, hold on, no matter what you say to them. Or say like the old joke, if my kid came home and got into a fight or got punched in the face, some parents are going to school. My first question would be, well, what did you do to get punched in the face? Like, because you don't get punched in the face for doing nothing. So that'd be my first question.
That's good.
Boundaries with young students, emotional, physical, psychological boundaries. You have to respect your own boundaries, and you have to respect other people's boundaries. Managing pressure, like I always tell the kids, if I stood up here in a room full of juniors, seniors, whatever, and I told them that they didn't feel any pressure in life, how would that make me look? Of course they feel pressure. Their pressure is real because it's their pressure, it's their life. And I would never say that, but they have to understand, they have to embrace the pressure. Because if you let pressure build up in a pipe, what's that pipe going to do? It's going to break. If you let pressure build up in your head or build up in your chest, you have to address pressure in a healthy, safe manner. That quote saved me more than once. I just put that up there for the kids that, I've had a few like, what does that mean to you? I've had a few like, rephrase it. But all it means essentially is before you're about to say something, if you get provoked, just hold on. And then, okay, now what do you want to say? Most times they won't say anything because it's over. If they can get past the fact that any embarrassment, any frustration, any anger, if you wait 20 seconds, you're nowhere near as mad, you're nowhere near as embarrassed, you're nowhere near as frustrated, ever. It's a fact. Just stop. And then revisit it 30 seconds later. And I guarantee you, like, I don't know what else matters. Friends versus acquaintances, always an important one. Yeah, they think they have a ton of friends. Again, back to that status, that reputation. How many friends you have? No, you have a lot of acquaintances. You don't have a lot of friends. Because as adults, we know if you have a handful, if you have 5 friends in your life, you're doing really, really good. And we talked about the unhealthiness, the relationships, the peer pressure, controlling it. If you're always the friend seeking support, if you're always the friend asking for favors, if you're always the friend not judging. You're always befriend, reliable. What kind of relationship is that? Like and I point out, if you're always a friend, it's always there or always not there. Like, what does that mean? Like, be aware, practice self-awareness. Take a look at that. And communication, if it's worth saving, if it's a friendship that you still want to have, then communicate. If it's not, if it's toxic, then cut it out of your life. All that being said, we have to address trauma and tragedy. We can do everything. We can be self-aware. We can make decisions. We can be in a really good place until something happens to us. Then what do we do? As officers, a lot of people we deal with, a lot of young adults, a lot of older adults, are angry, addicted, depressed, frustrated because they haven't addressed something that happened to them. So what do we do? How do we address trauma and tragedy? They will be challenged. They will have to change. We'll have to make adjustments, and we do that by being strong and being tough. I'm always asking, what does that mean to be strong? What does that mean to be tough? Are they related? Sometimes people think it's the same thing. So what are we talking about? Is being strong a good thing? Of course it is. We can all use strength, right, from a physical perspective, but we're not talking about strength. We're talking about toughness. And what kind of toughness are we talking about? Absolutely, mental toughness. Commitment to goals. Controlling your emotions, controlling your life, controlling your situations. Confidence. Orientation. Risk orientation, like I tell, that doesn't mean you go out and do crazy things. I mean you take calculated risks. You worry about your competencies, you focus on things. You have to get somewhere, you must take a risk. But it's a calculated, methodical risk. You're not just doing silly, crazy things. Anybody know what that is? Who are those people? U.S. Navy SEALs. That's the water phase of their training. What's that called? So, I tie this in with them because obviously this is a later stage. It's called drown proof. So it's a later stage where you can see their wrists are tied behind their back, their ankles are tied together. And this is obviously one of the end results of a phase where were they thrown in the water like that from day one? Did they just tie them up and throw them in the water? No. So what did they do? They got them adapted to and used to where they can deal with it. So if you don't know anything about this drown proofing phase, once they worked up to this, being tied behind their back, they're put in the pool. What do they have to do? What was that? No, not even get free. They're not getting loose from it. The concept is for them to understand if they can fight off the panic and understand all they have to do is take a breath and sink, and then push up, take a breath and sink, and push up. They can do that for 2 hours if they wanted to. Once you get past the panic and the need to do this, and just realize, okay, I'm okay. And then they can do that all day. So to teach a kid to emotionally drown-proof themselves is a huge, huge accomplishment.
So what I'm starting to see with a lot of the youth, and I don't know, I'm still struggling to figure out where this is coming from, and maybe you can shed some light. It seems like our youth are mentally not strong. And even in talking, with my 14 about Revelations, she goes in a complete panic. Like, she does not even, and I'm like, you gotta understand what's coming. I don't hear it every day. I can't deal with it. And I've talked to other kids her age about these things, and it's like, they can't, and I don't know, I went through a lot as a kid, a lot more than she ever had to, and I think by 14, I was like, I could take on the world, just because of all the trauma. And so when I look at that, I'm like, what do I need to do to prepare her so that she can? And so I've been even over the last couple of months, I have another 22-year-old I've been talking about her anxieties, and we've been working through some things, and I've been mentoring her. And we've been talking about this concept of how do you get to a point where you're mentally strong? So is there a way to help our kids who are in and I don't know if I think it's this. I want to blame the beast altogether, but
they're dependent on too many other things besides themselves.
Is that what it is? Is it in that? How did that happen? I don't.
Well, it's just a different era. I'm not going to show. I guess I'm going to show my age, but I was just talking to Pastor Matt. I'm from out west, so I drove across the country at 19 with literally a road map because
Me too.
there wasn't,
Right,
like, there
me
wasn't
too.
Google Maps.
Yeah.
Nobody was telling me where to go. I had a map, literally a paper map.
Great.
So it's just, and we'll talk about a few more things maybe in a half.
We used to go out at like 10 years of age. I just walked out of the house all day. And
Yeah.
my parents
Like,
had no idea where I was all day.
Until the street lights come on. They don't know about that yet.
Right,
You
so
play until
like-
the street lights come on.
Do you think
You
that's
want to
just
be outside.
because they're not having those exposures early on, and that they just don't know how to adapt to those kind of, okay.
It's a combination of things.
So how do we go back, like knowing that is the issue, and that is why so many kids are having so much anxiety and everything else going on? I mean, it didn't help with the pandemic. I mean, that
No.
really
That's-
shut the kids down.
The next slide, well, I've encouraged with the next slide for students to find it and print it out. So
Okay.
the last thing with this, like we said, just to get kids to know, what are they essentially doing? Like we said, they're just doing what it takes for as long as it takes. Just get a kid to understand, just do what it takes for as long as it takes. And you're gonna be okay. So developing mental toughness, you can find that yellow sheet on just Google mentally strong people don't. That'll come up under images. Print that out. Print out some copies. Have the kids read that. I say everybody in a class. I'll say, please print that out. Put it on a dresser. Put it on your mirror. Mentally strong people don't waste time. They don't feel sorry for themselves. They don't give away their power. They don't expect immediate change. They don't shy away from challenges or changes. They don't focus on what they can't control. They don't worry about pleasing everyone, fearing taking calculated risks. Well, you can see that if a kid read through that every day and picked one to work on every day, like resent other people's success. We talk about being a friend and having a if your friend is jealous of you all the time when good things happen to you, what kind of friend is that? Like, then who needs enemies if you have a friend like that? Don't fear alone time. And that's the other thing. Like kids now with their phones, like kids can't be by themselves. Kids are terrified to be by themselves, like to be alone with their thoughts. It's just, the world doesn't owe you anything. Nobody's going to ever give you anything. If it's free, it's probably, again, back to the gifting, it's probably for somebody else's motive, for somebody else's purpose. And don't expect immediate results. Safe social media, online phone usage, beware of bullying, cyberbullying. Really, like, that's where my tolerance level is. Schools are failing miserably at protecting kids from being bullied. They really are. It looks good on paper, but teachers doing nothing about it, really helping kids that are bullied every day. And I tell kids, if you let it happen, then you're a part of it. If you're watching, you're a part of it. And if you don't want to step in yourself and tell somebody else about it, that's not tolerating. Somebody else is being put in a disadvantage, somebody else is not feeling safe, you need to say something about that. Dignity, respect, protective factors. Be mindful of the grooming process, how dangerous it is and how effective it is, unfortunately. It is very, very powerful and it works. I always ask them, I've talked to 7th graders who are like, what do you mean in 5 years I'll still be in school? But talk to 11th graders, 12th graders, ask them, where do you see yourself? We talk about what's success mean? What kind of goals do you have? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Or where do you want to be in 10 years? And I say that because it takes years and years to build a life, to find a career, to build a family, to own something. How long does it take to ruin your life?
Less than 5 years.
Like that. It
One
takes
decision at a
seconds.
time.
And I tell them, no, it takes one pill, it takes one party. It takes getting in the car with one person that you shouldn't have in the car with. It takes that one social media app. It takes giving one person your name that you shouldn't give your name to. One decision can ruin your life or end your life. The effects of that decision can happen much, much faster than a decision. Good is boring. Like good sometimes is boring. Good, I mean, it's the never plan. Never too early to develop a plan. If it's worth thinking about, it's worth planning for. Never too late to change a plan. I tell the kids, don't be prideful, don't dig in and say, don't be stubborn. If it's not working, assess, reassess. Be okay with saying, hey, I messed up, that didn't work. I'm going to try something different. I'm not doing that again. Never a bad idea to assess or reassess. Everything is hard. Building a life, going to high school, playing sports, having a job, going to college, having a job, doing your homework, that's hard. Guess what else is hard? Going out and doing what you want, getting caught, getting arrested, being in debt, going to jail. That's hard too. Everything is hard. Choose your heart. I always try to walk them through a couple of the crimes or potential crimes and some things they're doing. I says, guys, read that please. Reckless, careless behavior, substance abuse, social media. Some things that they are doing might not be legal. Obviously, sometimes it's immoral, unethical, but sometimes it's also illegal. This is up there. I've been asked so many times. It wasn't originally in my presentation, but like I said, these are things we're done tiptoeing around. So this is consent in Pennsylvania by law. I always tell them, I said, this doesn't mean I'm telling you it's up here. I'm saying don't do it. I'm saying don't engage in it. But this is the law because nobody's going to listen. So I make sure they understand that. I also make sure they understand what consent actually is.
Can you go back for a second? So explain this. Children less than 13 of age cannot consent to sexual activity.
Yeah, this is from the Crimes Code. So if you think...
Has that changed recently?
No. What do you mean by recently?
So I was doing some stuff with Couth, and they have this thing where there were some laws that were just recently being pushed and passed
In other states?
in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we would have gotten, because we just were given a couple handouts and pretty much broke it down like that. We've got
So
nothing.
in my Couth training, it was, I don't know if you guys know what Couth is, but it's a peer-to-peer counsel. Do you know what Couth? Do you know what Couth is?
No.
Well, you should look into this. So it's a peer-to-peer counseling. They've up it. It's a website. They're pushing it through. Philadelphia's got it all pushing through all of their schools right now through the Board of Education as a way to deal with kids and their anxieties. And you can count that they have these counselors that get on there that aren't even certified and can basically do, and you have no idea who is on there, but you can also do peer-to-peer. So like I can, as an adult, I can get on there, pretend to be a 13-year-old student and counsel your children. And you can go in there and check, like, if you are binary or if you're, straight, whatever you are. And so if you are in the binary, you can basically go in and they're basically force feeding this garbage to your children with this lifestyle. And so there were laws that were passed to allow Couth to be able to do that, and I'm not sure exactly, maybe they were wrong, but I saw the bills and that they look like they have dropped that age.
Okay, potentially. And I only put this up there to really focus on, we talk about boundaries and decision and what it means to give consent, or now we could always say as a female to give consent or as a young male to have consent. Of course, that can go either way, but so what can affect consent? Age, like we said, force, better force. If you don't feel like you can leave, or you feel like you wouldn't be allowed to go, or again, unconsciousness. So few concepts that, again, situations, if you get into one and we get involved as officers, we're going to look at consent. And this is typically where I would look at the young men in the classroom and say, if you're unsure if consent is knowing, no means no, you find something?
Sorry, it says teens 13, 15 can consent to sexual activity with peers within the 4-H age group. I wonder if that's a loophole.
Well, no, that was
Because if Couth is a peer-to-peer counseling, right there is the loophole.
Well, there's still, even
Right,
that's
so you can say like, even though 15, 4 years, that's somebody who is an adult.
well, then there's still a crime. It's called corruption of minors. It wouldn't be a sex offense, it would be corruption of minors. So, yeah, that's still
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, it always comes back to respect and no. Literally, has anybody here ever seen the consent is like a cup of tea video? That'd be a good one it talks a lot of that, breaks it down. But in any situation, no literally means no. Have respect for those boundaries, and like I ask if there's any young men, any athletes, or anybody, and I'll say being accused of a sexual offense, and I'll look and I said, does that say being charged? Does that say being convicted? Does that say being investigated? What does that say? That just means you put yourself in a situation where somebody just said that you did something. And now what are you going to do? Where's your scholarship? Where's your military acceptance? Like, what are you doing? Somebody just said that you raped them. And when there's one of those trigger words again, what I'm about to say, yeah, somebody's going to say that you violated them. Well, and then I tell them, well, guess what? We're going to go back to that. Were those present? Did you have consent? To get kids to realize, understand what you're doing. And for the most part, like I said, I don't do it. Just don't engage in it. The phones, the sending, the asking for pictures. This is where I almost lose patience with the kids, because I say, and you know, young men quit asking for pictures. Young ladies quit sending pictures. It's always funny how when a picture gets out, the young lady is upset, mad at the world, everybody hates everybody. I said, who sent the picture? If you didn't send it, it wouldn't be out. So be mad at yourself. Like, I mean, yeah, it's frustrating now, but if you didn't send it, and I say, guys, quit asking. Like, it's disrespectful. Like, don't ask, don't send.
And as parents, don't ever think that your kids haven't done it. On the contrary, you should be assuming they are and find ways to parentally control whatever they're doing.
Hey, let me see your phone. And go, what's your password? What's your password? Oh,
No, just get filters.
they're like, no, that's not your phone. That's my phone. I'm paying for it. Big problem still, sextortion. Two types, sexually motivated, financially motivated. Different victimology there. Understand why are people reaching out, tricking people into sending photographs? Again, not unusual for today's youth to communicate online, overshare information, learning to be more independent, less supervision. So they're there, they have their phones, nobody's home, they start a conversation with people who aren't who they say they are. That's pretty much how it goes. Youth are susceptible to deceit and manipulate because they lack that life experience that we talked about, have a decreased ability to make good decisions under pressure. And like we said, communication, hopefully your student or your kid could say, they don't tell adults why, because they're afraid of getting punished, they're afraid of something. We'll try to handle it out of their own, do it on their own because they don't want to get in trouble, or they're embarrassed. Listen, if you send it, tell them. Just, it's okay, work from there. As a parent, you're not going to get in trouble. Oh, you're going to get in trouble, but you're not going to have your phone. You can always tell them. You can always tell them. Just like any parent, like, if you've been drinking, you know, I know you're not 21. Obviously, how many kids drink on 21? A lot. If you went to a party, you had a drink, call me. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Just call me. Don't drive home. Don't get in the car. Call me. We won't say anything about it today. We'll talk about it tomorrow. But they can't feel like they can't call you. And then, you know, then what? Then they wreck because they couldn't call you? Then how do you feel? The thing with sextortion with males, if you don't know, another male student just last week killed himself. High school students are killing themselves out of being blackmailed to send money. So yeah, it's more of a male problem, but again, you'll see the different motivations for it. Yeah, blackmail, threats, the wanting of money. So it's becoming it's still a big problem. Harassment, cyber harassment, terroristic threats. Students have to realize they can't say what they want. They can't threaten people. They can't get angry and do things like that. We have to operate. Pity. Nobody wants your pity. You know, we don't need pity. Nobody wants to be pitied. Sympathy, almost the same thing, I feel. Empathy, we talked about it. No, you don't feel my suffering. I don't feel your suffering. Let's just assume that we don't, and let's just get past that. That I don't know you don't know me. Respect, dignity, compassion. If we can be compassionate as much as possible, that's where it starts, and that's where it ends. This way, I tell young people, decision. You guys have a ton of them coming up. I don't envy you, especially now. Take it seriously. You guys have a lot to consider, a lot to think about, a lot to work through. Be confident, take it seriously. And I like to finish where we started. We talked about no bad kids, right? Just decisions and situations. Some you find yourself in. Could be trauma, tragedy, bad luck. Maybe you had nothing to do with it. But how many people, not even just kids, how many adults want to be in a situation? If you notice, it's the same situation, right? Did you find yourself there, or did you put yourself there? If you can start with, before you want to go, hey, but you did, but what did I do? What did I do to get here? I promise you, it's not easy. It's awkward, it's embarrassing, but you can start with you and say, what did I do to get here? What was my role in this? That's where it starts. And we can get kids to understand self-awareness, make mistakes, but get past that. This is what I did. How do we fix it? That is all I have. If you know of anybody, any other schools, any other agencies that we can talk to, please let me know.
Awesome. Let's give it up for
us go. If you have any further questions, you mind sticking around for just a little bit? Yeah, that'd be awesome if you could just follow up with that. Well, let's pray. Jesus, I just thank you so much, and I thank you that you have created us for a time such as this, Lord, that there is not anybody else in the world that you have wanted to put in the teenagers that are in our lives, their lives, Lord. There's no one else more ready and equipped than us. So God, I just thank you so much for this experience. I pray that everything that we have learned, we've gleaned, Lord, the questions we've asked and answered would just be, would equip us and empower us to do what we do well. Thank you, Jesus, for this opportunity. And I pray for our teenagers right now, and I thank you for them. But God, I just pray for their safety. I pray that they are equipped to make the right decisions, to have empathy, to do things the way that you would want them to do. Thank you, Jesus, for being such a good God. In your name we pray. Amen. You guys are free to go. Feel free to ask questions. Thank you guys again for coming. We'll be doing this every quarter-ish. So just we'll just keep you updated. Thanks, guys.